We'll call this meeting to order. We'll call this meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. This came from a vet thing. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read the call.
Dear Supervisor, please be advised that the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors will meet at 7 p.m. Oops, I got a new one, don't we? Nope, that's the one, because we changed it after. On August 15th, 2022, in the County Boardroom, all County Board members' claims are due in the County Clerk's office by noon on August 5th, 2022, so they can be prepared for Audit Committee approval. Sincerely, Paul Severson, County Clerk.
Roll call.
Bridget Turner.
Here.
Stacy Klein.
Here.
Richard Seisha. Lori Severson.
Here.
Andy Todd. Heather Fritsch.
Here.
Kevin Adams.
Here.
Dick Miller. David Orsh.
Here.
John Austin.
Here.
Riley Foltz.
Here.
Robert Becker.
Here.
Dan Schreiner.
Here.
Kellen Nelson.
Here.
David Larson.
Here.
Jeannie Nutter.
Here.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
We have 14 and 3.
Okay, we had two sets of minutes, the 13th and 18th. I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Let's do the
Oh,
yep. 2 and 3.
well, you got two is open meeting law. Open meeting law requirements. I put that minutes right there with open meeting law. Open meeting law requires to be met with proper posting and notification. We have a 13-item agenda.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Minutes, it's from the 13th and the 18th. So someone make a motion to approve both, or motion made by Ms. Turner, second by Supervisor Foltz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Carried. Appearances, we're fortunate. What?
Should ask for a pause when we do that this one too.
Oh.
For future, here you go.
That was
Should
just
ask
so
if there's
loud.
any
It was just so
discussion.
loud on
Just
the
assumed it was unanimous.
approved, I just said it on the vote. Anyway, appearances, we were fortunate tonight to have with us the top attorney in the state for,
No pressure.
Andy's perfect on rules and regulations and the Robert Rules of Order, and knows all the do's and don'ts of a county board supervisor. So I invited him to come to one of our board meetings. For some of us didn't even get to the board trainings, so it's important that we get this from Andy Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Just by way of background, I'm General Counsel for the Counties Association. I've worked with the Counties Association. They're a client of mine. I'm an attorney in private practice, but I represent the Counties Association. They've been a client for over 25 years. And so my experience relates to representing the association, representing counties all over the state. But I want to start this discussion on roles and responsibilities by saying I've never sat in your chair. So realistically, you can say to me, yeah, but you've never been a supervisor. How can you talk about roles? And you're right. I've never sat in your chair. I've never made the tough decisions that you all make on a monthly basis. I get that. But what I'm here to hopefully have a discussion with you about is the difficult role that you have, and how do we separate in county government the role of the county board supervisor versus the role of our elected officials versus the role of our staff. And I found over my tenure in representing counties across the state, I've seen all sorts of disputes. I'm a lawyer. People typically don't pick up the phone and call me and say, hey, Andy, how are you doing today? Everything's good with me. Nobody says that to me. Aside from my hurt feelings, I get over that because people do pay me to solve problems, so that's good. But I've seen so many disputes that relate to who's making a decision, and a dispute over who has the authority to do this certain thing here, as opposed to an argument based upon a policy debate about the very important work that we do as counties day in and day out. And I've said all along, if we can get rid of the disputes about who has what authority and when, and get back to the really challenging and important stuff that we deal with as counties day in and day out, we'd be in a much better spot. And so I'm here to hopefully give you my observations. That's what they are, my observations and experience about what I've seen working in county government, to give you an idea and hopefully create a discussion point for all of you as you go about your work on the Trempealeau County Board. And I know your chair listened to me for the better part of an hour and a half, 2 hours talk about this. So if he falls asleep, it's not because I'm boring, it's because he's heard me talk about this before. But I want this to be a discussion. It's okay to disagree with me. That's fine. We can have a discussion about several points, because I might say something tonight that you say, that makes no sense. That's not how the way it works. That's not the way it works. That's okay. Let's have the discussion about that. And then, when we get through with roles and responsibilities, I'm going to talk to you about the really exciting part. I saved the best part for the end, and that's ethics. I know everybody was itching to get to the ethics discussion tonight, too. But I think that's important because it's a very serious topic, obviously. But number two, if we conduct ourselves in a way that is open, honest, and transparent, we're just going to be much better off in the way that we do business and the way we conduct our affairs. And so we're going to round out the roles and responsibilities discussion with a discussion on ethics. So with that, we'll talk first about roles and responsibilities. Starting off, county structure. County authority comes from Chapter 59 of the statutes. That's the chapter that deals with county government. We're not like cities and villages. Cities and villages have recognition within the Wisconsin Constitution. Now, we're recognized as counties in the Wisconsin Constitution, but it simply says that the legislature can create counties and the legislature can tell counties what to do. That doesn't, frankly, make me feel very good, because we do so much more than just what the legislature tells us to do, but foundationally understand that counties, unlike cities and villages, do not have constitutional home rule authority. We have what's called administrative home rule authority recognized in statute. And I'll get to that particular statute in a minute. But again, it's a very important distinction. Why is this distinction important? Well, when it comes to roles and responsibilities, and we think about our federal government, we've got Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 of the United States Constitution. It very clearly delineates the role of the executive branch, the role of the legislative branch, and the role of judicial branch. We have 3 different provisions within the Wisconsin Constitution that recognize the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And when it comes to city government, we even have recognition within the statutes of an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. And so do counties have 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Do we have 3 branches? Do we have a legislative branch? What's our legislative branch? The county board. Do we have an executive branch?
Sure, wouldn't it?
Do we? Do we have an executive branch? Clearly within Chapter 59, does it say the executive branch of county government? No, it doesn't. Closest we come is 59.17 for counties with a county executive, but that's only 12 out of 72 in the state. So counties may not have a clearly defined executive branch within Chapter 59, but we'll talk about that in a moment, about whether we should recognize an executive branch that's separate from the policymaking branch. Do we have a judicial branch? The judge is a state employee. He administers state law. That's the state's judicial system. So as counties, we really don't have a judicial system. I mean, even at the city-village level, they have a city or a municipal court system, state level, state court system. Feds have their own court system. These counties don't really have. So we're this kind of weird form of government that exists somewhere between cities and villages and the state and the feds. So you may have an idea of why counties are set up the way that they're set up, with this strange mix somewhere between city, village, and state and feds. Any ideas? Thinking back to 1848 when we were formed as a state. Does anybody realize how long it took to get an email from Whitehall down to Madison? And so when we think about the purpose of county government as originally intended, going way back over 150 years, as originally intended, the purpose was to have a presence of the state in a particular local jurisdiction. That was county government. That's why we have constitutional offices. That's why we have a sheriff. What laws does the sheriff enforce? Sheriff? Primarily state, right? Primarily state law. So we have a sheriff in the county to enforce state law. We have a register of deeds that records what records? State land records. We have a treasurer that collects what money? State taxes. We have a clerk who, aside from maintaining peace, decorum, and order at county board meetings, also issues licenses for what purpose? State marriage, state birth, state death, state vital records, all right? So in other words, if you think about county government the way it existed in 1848, it was the local presence of the state. And so it's not surprising that in statute, in attorney general opinions, and elsewhere, people refer to counties as administrative efficiencies of the state of Wisconsin. But we all know that what we do as counties is far more important than simply the bidding of Madison. We take care of people here in Trempealeau County, all right? So the challenge that we have, unlike other branches of government, is that we have to govern ourselves and we have to organize ourselves based upon a set of laws that existed 150 years ago. That's not easy. It's not easy at all. So I have zero surprise that there are disputes that arise every now and again between people about who gets to make what decisions because there's a lack of clarity throughout the statutes, all right? So again, it's important to think about roles and responsibilities as county government because we don't have Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 of the Constitution to turn to clearly delineate those roles. All right, so I'll get off my soapbox for a minute. We'll go back to the presentation. Counties are governed by a board of supervisors. Board size ranges throughout the state from 7, Menominee County has a 7-person board, up to 38. Marathon County has a 38-person board. Dane County, I think, is 37. And so if you think that you've got it tough trying to find consensus here, imagine sitting on a board with 36 of your peers. That can be very challenging. All right, I mentioned this before, Administrative Home Rule Authority. 59.03 sub 1, and this is a very important statute because it gives you, as Trempealeau County, the freedom to figure out the best governance form, to figure out the best organizational form. All right, so you have a lot of freedom to make that determination because of this statute. Now, this statute didn't exist before 1985. In 1985, the Counties Association led this tremendous lobbying effort to bring more form to county government, similar to what we see with our city and village counterparts. All right, so 5903 comes in the mid-1980s, and we'll get into some other provisions that came into being in the mid-1980s in a moment. But understand that counties had existed from 1848 all the way through 1985 with basically very, very little discussion about a county's authority to organize itself the way that it sees fit. So we have this concept of self-organization as well. Is Trempealeau County self-organized, Paul? All right, self-organization is an election under 59.10 of the statutes. It gives the county the right, again, piggybacking on the rights granted under 59.03, so that you can elect to become self-organized and determine how much you're going to pay yourselves, determine how you're going to fill vacant seats on the board. If you want, you can use staggered terms. I know that your clerks would be thrilled to run elections every year instead of every 2 years, so you can do that if you'd like. So self-organization is something that you can do. I always tell counties there's no harm in doing it, so adopt the ordinance, and all it has to say is we are a self-organized county, period. That's all you need to do, because then you have the freedom and flexibility to determine your per diem rates, determine your compensation, like I said, for county board supervisors, how to fill vacancies on the board, and so on.
We do all that, though.
But you're not self-organized.
That's true.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. 3 forms of government. This, again, came in the mid-1980s. What the legislature said in the mid-1980s is Yeah, counties, you're getting a lot more sophisticated in terms of the business that you have to do as counties. And so we're going to give you three options. You can either be a county executive form, a county administrator form, or an administrative coordinator form. And when we look at what happened as a result of that, we saw that there are counties that decided to have executives, counties that decided to have administrators, and a whole lot of counties that have administrative coordinators. And when this law first came into effect in 1985, the overwhelming majority of counties were administrative coordinator counties, all right? Slowly, since 1985, we've seen a migration. We've seen more counties move toward an administrator form of government. Now, there are a few that decided that the executive form was the way to go, but those are mostly the populous counties, primarily in southeast Wisconsin, where you've got the executive form of government. But then we've seen another shift toward the administrator form away from administrative coordinator. Honestly, I have no preference one way or the other. I may have personal opinions about what I think is most efficient, just like you all have personal opinions about what way is most efficient. Just understand that you have to have one of the three. Trempealeau County right now is one of the counties, I think there are 10, that have the county clerk serving as administrative coordinator, okay? So you're one of 10 counties that have a clerk as administrative coordinator. Again, the rest are a mix, even within the administrative coordinator model, all right? It's not a majority anymore, but it's a plurality, all right? There are more administrative coordinator counties than there are administrator counties. But even within the administrative coordinator counties, as you can see on this map, there's a great disparity among how they treat administrative coordinators. Some counties have an administrative coordinator that's a full-time position. That administrative coordinator is the head of the Department of Administration within the county, all right? Other counties, like Trempealeau County, have the administrative coordinator position held by another elected official, whether it be the county clerk or board chair or somebody else. So let's talk about these three forms and what kind of works, what I see not working, and so on. The county executive form is the most familiar to us because it's very similar to what we see at the state level. The county executive is like the governor of the county, elected at large, appoints and supervises department heads, has veto authority over resolutions and ordinances, and also submits an annual budget to the county board, all right? So the county executive is kind of like the governor for a particular county. A county administrator has many of the same functions as county executive, but it's not elected. The county administrator is hired by the county board and serves at the pleasure of the county board. Whenever the county board decides that the county administrator is not doing his or her job, the county board has the opportunity to dismiss the administrator. But the administrator appoints and supervises department heads subject to board confirmation, submits an annual budget, but has no veto authority over resolutions and ordinances. All right, so when I think about the county administrator position, it's very similar, in my estimation, to what you see in the private sector with a CEO. Typically, what happens in a for-profit corporation is you've got shareholders who elect a board of directors. The board of directors hire a CEO, and the CEO serves at the pleasure of the board of directors. And so county administrator is very similar in my estimation because you've got the shareholders, the electors, who elect the county board, and the county board then has the opportunity to appoint the administrator, and the administrator serves at the pleasure of the county board. And then we got everybody else. And the words of the statute just crack me up. It cracks me up because it says the administrative coordinator shall be responsible for coordinating all administrative and management functions of the county government not otherwise vested by law in boards or commissions or in other elected officers. That's incredibly broad. And as you could see on the slide before, when I talked about the differences among all the counties that have an administrative coordinator and how they treat that position, that's a reflection of the language that we've got here in 59.19. So remember, when we started the discussion about county authority, we talked about administrative home rule in 59.03. And I told you that Trempealeau County has the opportunity to govern itself and organize itself the way it sees fit. And so when you've got an administrative coordinator, you get to decide what that administrative coordinator should or should not do. What power does that administrative coordinator have? Should we have a completely separate position that is titled administrative coordinator, or should we combine administrative coordinator with a current position like you do now with a county clerk? And so you have a blank slate where you get to write the job description for your administrative coordinator. It's not as clearly defined as the county executive or county administrator, and that's okay. That's okay. You have the opportunity to write that job description. So let's talk about the legislative branch within county government, and that's the county board. You serve in a legislative capacity. Your authority is not singular, all right? County board supervisors do not have individual authority over any department within county government, any commission, any committee, any board, none of that. Your authority is collective. And so you exercise collective authority by enacting policy, all right? What is the most important policy document in Trempealeau County government? Does anybody know? Mr. Chair, you should know this. You listened to me 2 weeks ago.
I ain't supposed to answer these.
Is that what it is? Yeah, he fell asleep. You know, Rick, kick him every 10 minutes if you wouldn't mind. No, I'm serious. What speaks volumes about the priorities in Trempealeau County? What tells the citizens your priorities?
Budget.
The budget. All right, so the finance people get upset when I start talking about the budget being the preeminent policy document within the county, so they think it's a financial document. It is the furthest thing from a financial document, even though it's got numbers, that's great, but that document itself speaks volumes about the priorities, what you're going to fund, what you're not going to fund, and so on. And who controls that document? The county board. Even in counties with an executive and an administrator, where they submit the budget. Notice that the statutes say they submit the budget, not adopt it. The county board adopts that budget. So that's the preeminent policy-making document. And when we think about budget deliberations, I mean, that's democracy at work right there, is that everybody is talking about the various priorities that they want to see in that budget document. So that is an example of the policy-making function of the county board. All right, so I asked the question last on this slide. I say, do county supervisors individually supervise anything at all? I don't think they do. I think that's a misnomer. And if it was up to me, I'd go through Chapter 59 of the statutes and replace out the word supervisor with member, county board member, because that's what you are. You're a member of a collective group that collectively makes decisions. So what is your function as a county board member? You want to be involved. You want to represent the public. You want to be accountable to the electors that put you into that seat. You adopt your budget. You levy taxes to support that budget. You determine the level of services that are to be provided to the citizens. In other words, your primary function is to enact policy. And when we talk about enacting policy, we come up with this V word. How many of you have been called a visionary by somebody other than your spouse in the last 6 months? Zero. It's a big nothing, right?
V or B?
V. The V word. Come on. Come on, Mr. Chair. So when we talk about the function of the county board, in my estimation, it ought to be our goal to be called a visionary. Because a visionary is somebody who sets the policy, who looks 2, 3, 4, 10 years down the road and says, this is where we want to be, and this is how we're going to get there. So you cast that vision out. And when you cast that vision out, who's executing on that vision? Who's responsible for doing all of the heavy lifting to make sure that that vision is realized? That's your staff, all right? It's not you guys as county board members. Visionaries aren't the ones who have the tremendous biceps. The people who have the tremendous biceps are the ones doing all of the work necessary to make that vision a reality. And so coming back to the dual role of the policymaking branch within county government, the first role is to adopt policy. That's clear. That's your job. Second role of the county board is to hold staff accountable for carrying out the policy direction established by this board. So I think about the two roles of the county board. Number one, enact policy, and number two, hold the individuals responsible for carrying out that policy accountable, okay? So those are the two roles of the county board. Even the county board chair doesn't have individual authority as it relates to the operations within Trempealeau County government. Your county board chair by statute 59.12 is the head of the legislative body. Just as the Speaker of the House is the head of the House of Representatives, a legislative body, the Speaker of the Assembly at the state level, the same. Your county board chair's job by statute is to shepherd items of business through the county board process and to make sure that you are governing yourselves consistent with state law and consistent with Trempealeau County policy. But your county board chair doesn't run the highway department. Your county board chair doesn't run the sheriff's office. Your county board chair doesn't run any department within county government. He is merely the head of this particular legislative body. When we talk about standing committee functions, if we talk about what is a committee designed to do, let's think about the dual role of the county board member: enact policy and hold staff accountable. As a committee member, you are serving in a capacity to assist the county board in its policymaking function and assist the county board in its accountability function. And you do that by listening to staff at the committee level and coming up with recommendations for this full board. And you do so by interacting with staff at the committee level to, again, make recommendations to the county board on direction from that accountability piece. And so your primary role as a committee of the county board is to assist this board in policy development. Now, I've not seen any of your committee meetings, so I'm honestly asking this question. Is there a lot of policy debate that happens at the committee level as opposed to the board level? Is that primarily where a lot of the debate goes? That's awesome. That's where it should be. And I think about times, because I'm called from time to time to work with the state legislature on certain issues, and all of the debate from all of the various interest groups and others comes in at the committee level, and then the committee makes a recommendation to either the full Senate or the full Assembly. And so that's where all of the really important public hearings and things take place. And so I think it's awesome if you have a lot of the heavy lifting done at the committee level as it relates to policy development. That's where it should happen. And so I think that to the extent that you haven't done that as well as you should, that's something you can look at, is what are our rules governing ourselves? What are we saying? Where are we saying that all of this heavy lifting occurs in policy development? And as much as we can, let's push it to the committee level so that honest debate can happen at that level before it gets to the county board. And so when we talk about the involvement of the committee, we talk about the committees. I'm going to get into a concept here of committees of jurisdiction. And I'm pretty sure that Trempealeau County has committees of jurisdiction for each department within county government. Is that right? And I want to look back in time to when committees of jurisdiction, I think, had a more important role in county government. I think back 100 years, I would imagine that committees of jurisdiction did exercise a lot of operational oversight on particular departments within county government. And so, for example, your highway department was governed by your highway committee. And in fact, if you look at 83.015 of the statutes and the role of the highway committee, it was drafted a long time ago, they're making some pretty important decisions that relate to that particular highway department that I think all of us would say, no, those are really operational decisions. Those aren't policy-making decisions. Those are truly operational decisions. And so again, it's an example of the statutes not necessarily keeping up with the times, so to speak. The committee of jurisdiction concept makes a ton of sense to divide responsibility among the committees of the county board. But I think there's danger there in that it also establishes a system where people are encouraged at the county board level to have operational oversight, where maybe that is not the role that the county board committees ought to be playing. And so I think it can be dangerous if we take the committee of jurisdiction concept to an extreme to say that those committees have some sort of power or authority as it relates to the operations of a particular department. I'm just going to plant that and leave that because, again, I think that you need to decide exactly how you want your committees to operate and under what rules, but just think about that from a committee of jurisdiction standpoint. Let's talk about staff here for a moment. I talked about the county board rule being dual, to enact policy and hold staff accountable. Let's talk about what staff's role is. Staff also has a dual role, two things. Number one, they have to provide information advice to the policymakers so that you all can make an informed policy decision. And then number two, they have to carry out the policy that you establish. And so we see these dual roles play out all the time. At a county board meeting, do you typically have staff from some department giving you information relative to a resolution that you've got pending before you? Yep. Yes. So that's one of their primary roles, is to make sure that you're making an informed policy decision. And then when you adopt a resolution or adopt an ordinance, who's responsible for carrying out the terms of that resolution or ordinance? That's staff, okay? So those are the two roles. Now, that sounds really good, and it's really easy for me to stand up here and tell you all of this, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty details of how to implement that to make sure that we have an understanding of the two roles on both sides and that we don't interfere with each other, that's where it gets difficult. Because I often get into these meetings and we have staff that's toward the back of the wall, and I will say to the county board members, all right, now don't turn around, but I want staff to raise your hand if you think the board micromanages you. And every hand shoots up in the air. And then I ask the county board, how many of you think that the board micromanages staff? And people look around and maybe a hand or two goes up, but typically they say, no, we don't micromanage here. There's a disconnect there, all right? Now the disconnect may be in the definition of micromanagement, because I have been in counties, believe it or not, where staff thinks that they ought to be accountable to no one. That's a problem. But I've also been in plenty of counties where county board members feel like it's their responsibility to spend each waking hour with some member of the staff to make sure they're doing a good job. And that's a problem too. There has to be some sort of middle ground. And so you have to have discussions with staff about the dual roles, where the job of the county board ends and where the job of staff picks up. Because if you don't have those discussions and have that understanding, that again is where you get into problems in terms of getting things done within the county. So when we think about the function of staff and administration, they're not visionaries, all right? You don't want them to be called visionaries. You may authorize them to have a vision, to come up with a strategy recommendation back to this board, but their focus is on the day-to-day, the minutia, the short term. How do I implement the policy that the county board just established? That's what we want staff to do. We want them to have attention to detail. We want them to have specialized training so that they can carry out the policy in an effective manner. And this is where I always get into trouble, all right? I ask county boards, think about this, all right? Let's imagine that Trempealeau County is hiring a new highway commissioner. We want to put out a help wanted ad. I suppose now it's called an Indeed posting or whatever. But in that posting, in that help wanted ad for a new highway commissioner, what are we going to say? We want somebody, engineer, so they're going to have some educational background. We want them to have some experience with county highways. So they've got to have some relevant experience. They've got to have some certifications. They've got to have references. They've got to have a clean background. In other words, we're going to have a full paragraph discussing how we want the best and the brightest to apply for the job of Highway Commissioner of Trempealeau County. Now, think about that same help wanted ad or Indeed posting for County Board Supervisor. What are the qualifications to be a County Board Supervisor?
To get the most votes.
That's right.
And you have to live in your jurisdiction.
You have to live in your jurisdiction. How old do you have to be?
18.
Can you be a felon? No. All right, so that's the help wanted ad. Over 18, live in your district, can't be a felon. Wow. But it's very important to understand this. There are a ton of talented people that serve on county boards throughout this state. Doctors, farmers, small business owners, teachers, I mean, go down the list. Talented people. But is any of that a prerequisite to be a county board member? No. How do you get to be a county board member? You get the most votes. So what does that mean? That the function of a county board member is to be responsive to the electors that put you in that seat. No specialized training required. And so when we set up this system, we don't want people who decide that they're going to take over an operation of a county department, even though they may have relevant experience in that area. The most important function of a county board member is to be accountable to the public who put him or her in that seat. Instead, we are going to go find the best and the brightest out there to carry out the policy that we established. All right? So again, think about the help wanted ad when we think about the roles and responsibilities of county board versus staff. Leadership roles. I talked a little bit about the board chair. The same can be said of a committee chair, is that serving in a leadership capacity over a legislative body means that you are the ultimate shepherd and making sure that from a governance and organizational standpoint, things proceed through the board or the committee in an efficient manner. But in terms of leadership roles, department heads have a leadership role within their department. But who establishes the policies that are going to dictate how it is that they lead? The county board. For example, do you have a handbook in Trempealeau County, a personnel handbook? Did you as a county board adopt that handbook?
We will tonight.
You will tonight. So whose handbook is it? It's the board's handbook. But does that mean that the board is involved in every single personnel interaction within the county? No. But do you expect your department heads to adhere to the handbook when they are interacting in personnel matters? Absolutely. So that's an example. Policy of the board is the handbook. Hand that handbook off to staff and say, implement this, you have to follow this. All right? So just so you don't think I'm making this all up, there actually was a court case that dealt with the distinction between the policy-making branch in county government and the administrative or executive branch. Now, this particular court case dealt with a dispute between county executive and county board. And I'll step to the side for a moment and tell you my true feelings on the county executive model. I think it's very inefficient to have an executive elected by the people at large and then somehow have to carry out the policy established by the board. That's a problem. That's just ripe for dispute, but that's just me. But nonetheless, we have a court case that dealt with a dispute between a county executive and the county board. And in resolving that dispute, the Court of Appeals looked at the function of the county board and the function of the county executive. And the Court of Appeals said the county board's function is primarily policymaking and legislative, while the county executive functions as an administrator and a manager, citing to an old Attorney General opinion. Citing the dictionary, the court said policy is defined as a high-level overall plan embracing the general goals and acceptable procedures, especially of a governmental body. And then citing to a treatise, the court said legislative power is distinguished from executive power as the authority to make laws but not to enforce them, or appoint the agents charged with the duty of such enforcement. The crucial test for determining, in other words, where is this line drawn? The Court of Appeals said, when we figure out what's legislative and what's administrative, we determine, is this making a new law or policy, or is it enforcing a policy that's already in existence? If it's making a new policy, that's the county board's function. If it's enforcing a law or policy already in existence, that's an executive or an administrative function. Now, in this case, it was a dispute between the Outagamie County Executive and the Outagamie County Board. It had to deal with the lease of agricultural land surrounding the Outagamie County Airport. The county board said, we want to lease that land out to a local farmer. County executive said, I'm not going to lease that land. It's a hazard. it creates a dangerous situation. Now, there was nothing to do with state regulation or FAA regulations. It was all fine under those, but the county executive made the determination we are not leasing that land because it's a danger. So they sued each other. Who do you think won that dispute? Is leasing the land, the decision, are we going to lease this land, is that a county board decision or is that an executive decision? Thoughts? Board. Yeah, it's a board decision. The court ruled in favor of the board in this case. But here's the kicker. Who negotiates the lease? The executive. Yeah. So, our system as counties is so often set up to create conflict. That's an example of just creating conflict. That, oh, it's the county board's decision on whether you're going to lease, but it's the executive's decision on what that lease looks like. Why are we creating so much conflict? Why don't we have clear delineation within Chapter 59 that says this decision belongs here and this decision belongs over here? I happen to think that that conflict is by design to force people to try to come together and compromise. All right? We're going to talk about it a little bit with constitutional officers because they have a special role within county government that doesn't exist anywhere else in any other level of government. But I think that conflict exists as an opportunity for you to have discussions with the other officials and personnel within county government about how do we best solve this particular problem. So, if we don't distinguish between the policy-making branch within county government and the administrative or executive branch within county government, we see problems. We spend all sorts of time on trivial matters. We read reams upon reams of documents and so on. I don't think any of these laundry list of items surprise any of you. But I highlighted one particular point because I think it's particularly instructive. We have reactivity as opposed to proactivity. Is a visionary reactive or proactive? Our visionary is proactive. Wouldn't it be awesome to show up at a county board meeting with the knowledge that every single problem has been solved already? That you're not going to have to think about how you're going to solve a particular issue that arose last week, that it's already taken care of? That would be awesome. That would be fantastic. And I think all of you are probably sitting here saying that you live in some utopian fantasy world. And to an extent, you're right. I get that. But if we focus on policy and we focus on keeping within our role as a county board of policy making and accountability for the agents, the personnel, the staff, the department heads responsible for carrying out our policy, then in many ways, we set it and forget it. We know that any problem is going to be addressed through policy. It's not to say we aren't going to have to deal with issues. We ultimately will. But if we do a good job focusing on policy and we do a good job of putting the right people in the right position to carry out that policy, we become far more proactive than reactive. And it increases the likelihood that somebody in this room gets called a visionary in the next 6 months, which would be awesome. So, I put up on this board the org chart, very simplified, the org chart for counties with an administrator. As I mentioned at the outset, I view the administrator model as the most consistent with what we see in the private sector in a for-profit corporation, is that we have shareholders that elect a board that appoints a CEO. Here we have electors that elect a county board that appoints an administrator. In this organizational chart with an administrator, how many employees does the county board have? 1. There's one line between county board and county administrator. The administrator is responsible for the department heads. The administrator is responsible for staff. If somebody messes up, whose problem is it? The administrator. And if the administrator doesn't solve that problem, what does the county board do? Takes out the administrator. That's the county board's option at that point. Now, that's not to say that the department heads don't have interaction with the county board or the committees. Because remember, the dual role of staff, it's not only to carry out policy established by the board, but also to provide information and advice to the board to make an informed policy decision. All right? But that's different than a direct reporting relationship in the employment context. The direct reporting relationship goes from county board to administrator down to the department heads. And so now when we have an administrative coordinator, again, it's very difficult to come up with the standard charts because different counties with administrative coordinators do it different ways, but you can see how the lines might get blurred. We have certain department heads that report to committees of jurisdiction, and committees of jurisdiction are responsible for making recommendations on whether we retain or dismiss a particular department head. And so the committees are asked to serve in both a policymaking and an operational role, which is, again, where we see disputes arise. All right? And so it doesn't have to be this way. If you find this way to be efficient, great. That's awesome, but it doesn't have to be this way. Remember, 59.03 gives us a lot of flexibility. And to the extent possible, I'm suggesting if we want to be proactive, we try to reduce the amount of vagaries and other ambiguities that exist within the reporting relationships. And the way that we do that is to clearly define the role of the board, clearly define the role of the administrative coordinator, clearly define the role of our committees, and clearly define the roles of our department heads and staff. So then we get to the question that you say, yeah, Andy, that sounds all great and all good. Your organizational chart's pretty, but you forgot about our constitutional officers. Where do our constitutional officers fall on this organizational chart? Well, they're kind of these free agents that serve in a dual role, and you're starting to see a theme here with my presentation on the dual roles. So constitutional officers answer to the electorate for their constitutional duties. The people put the sheriff in his position because they think he's best equipped to enforce the law within Trempealeau County. But we also ask the sheriff to oversee a lot of personnel. He's got to take care of the jail, he's got to take care of his deputies, he's got to take care of dispatch, he's got to do all sorts of different things. And in doing that, he's got to administer personnel policies. Who establishes personnel policies? The county board. The county board. The sheriff does not have constitutional authority over personnel policies. That's a county board function. And so in a way, we want the sheriff to act as though he were a department head within the county as it relates to administration of county policy, but also the sheriff has to maintain his constitutional authority to enforce the law according to what the electorate has established. And so it can be a challenge to try to figure out where that line is drawn between constitutional authority and authority that is granted by the county board. Again, when I talked about the conflict being inherent within the statutes, it is no more apparent than when we deal with constitutional officers. And by the way, this applies to the sheriff, the county clerk, the treasurer, register of deeds, all the constitutional officers. They have the independent authority to carry out their constitutional and statutory duties as they see fit. And the county board can't say a word about it. You can't interfere with their ability to carry out their constitutional and statutory powers. But what do you control? The money, the budget. Talk about a grand conflict, right? And so the cases that I have seen dealing with disputes between board and sheriff as it relates to constitutional authority typically come from Milwaukee County. That county is just ripe for dispute, I guess. But it's never an easy fight. It's never a pretty fight. It gets ugly. And so I always tell counties, avoid the fight. Have a discussion with your sheriff, because I don't think anybody on this board doesn't want to see the laws enforced within Trempealeau County. You all do. And so have a discussion with the sheriff about needs within his department in order to enforce those laws. Have a discussion with your clerk about needs within his office in order to carry out his duties under 59.23 of the statutes. Have a discussion with your treasurer, your register of deeds, going on down the list. Know what it is that they do and understand how it is that they do it. One of the things that I used to see a lot was with new county boards, they'd come on and there would be a period of time, call it 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, where different county board members would do ride-alongs with the sheriff's department, ride-alongs with the highway department, and so on, just to understand what it is that each of these particular officers and departments within county government, what it is that they do. Do you have that type of process in Trempealeau County for orientation at all?
No, but it sounds like a good idea.
Sheriff, what are your thoughts on that? I'll put you on the spot. What do you think?
Absolutely. I actually invited them all into the jail to take a look at the jail, how it functions.
Well, you didn't tell them you were going to put them in a cell, though, right?
I had to let them out. I didn't know that I had to let them out.
I think that's a great point. And I know I'm from Ozaukee County, and I know the sheriff very well. I represent the county, and they, like clockwork, with new board orientation, tour the jail, ride along with the deputy, just so they can see the sheriff believes this is incredibly important, so that the board understands what it is that the sheriff does day in, day out. Because, Sheriff, your job is so much different than a city or village police officer. And I don't think people, the general public, I don't think gets that. They see a badge, whether it be on the sheriff or on a city police officer, and they think it's the same thing. It's not. Far different function. And so I would really encourage you to think about an orientation process. It doesn't even have to be orientation. You don't have to wait 2 years for this. Have a process where all of you have an understanding of what it is that your sheriff does, what it is your clerk does, what it is your highway commissioner does, what's going on within the county, to appreciate and understand how it is that they carry out the policy that you establish. Because that's going to give you the tools that you need to make informed policy decisions, and when it comes to budget time, to fund at the appropriate level. Now, do we think in a million years that this board is ever going to 100% agree on funding levels with the sheriff? No, absolutely not. But you can have an honest debate about funding levels if you both have an understanding of what it is that the sheriff is trying to do. And that's all I'm encouraging through this entire process. So our goal is, as an administrative team and as a county board, to work together. Again, I live in some utopian fantasy world where everybody joins arms and sings songs every morning. I get that. It's a fantasy world. But, yeah, it would be great, depending on how well you sing. I don't sing very well. So if we want this atmosphere, this culture in Trempealeau County, how do we get there? All right, these are just some pointers that I think are pretty self-evident. I don't need to read these to you. You can take a look at this. But to me, the most important thing is the thing I put first on this list. Know your job and try not to interfere with that of administration. And I'll say the same thing to staff. Know your job and don't interfere with the role of the county board. That all comes back to our entire discussion tonight of understanding the distinction in the roles and responsibilities of the county board and the roles and the responsibilities of county staff. That, to me, is the number one item. If you can solve for that, if you can figure that out, the rest of these, they kind of fall in line, all right? They're kind of there. Now, the one thing I will tell you is that typically, in conjunction with this discussion, I give a presentation on like open meetings law. I'm not doing that tonight because your board chair said, Andy, you're going to put everybody to sleep, not just me, if you speak longer than an hour. And so I'm cutting you short. Open meetings law is very important. One thing I want to emphasize is that try to conduct county business within the walls of this meeting room or the walls of a committee meeting room. Don't take the discussions outside and elsewhere. I understand the natural desire to get things done. I mean, frankly, I've seen all of your paychecks. You're not doing this for the money. You're not. And if you are, we'll have a discussion afterward about career choice. You're doing this because you want to make a difference. You're doing this because you believe in county government and you believe that you want to serve the citizens in Trempealeau County. And oftentimes, that desire gets in the way of governance and organizational form, meaning that our natural inclination is when we see a problem, we roll up our sleeves and we take care of that problem. But that may not be the best result. Again, understanding our role, understanding that we operate as a collective, not an individual. That's what's important as well. So try to make your decisions in this room, in a committee room. Don't fall prey to that temptation to take business outside of the county walls. And again, I understand it's very easy for me to stand up here and say that, but remember, I'm a lawyer, so my job is to keep you out of jail, and that's what I'm trying to do here. And I understand that things will occur, but if you keep it in the back of your mind that you're going to try to conduct yourselves within the walls of this room, I think you're going to be much better served. So, key points to remember, the takeaways here. We can only do as counties what the statutes allow us to do, but remember that 59.03 of the statutes gives us tremendous flexibility to operate as Trempealeau County government the way that we see fit. We serve as a county board in a legislative capacity. Staff serves in an administrative capacity. We set the policy. Staff carries out that policy. Staff gives us information to make an informed policy decision. We hold staff accountable for carrying out our policy. Dual roles of the board, dual roles of the staff. Micromanaging is stifling. It stifles productivity. So just, again, have a discussion with staff about what the word micromanaging means, okay? And figure out what works from a policy perspective to ensure that we are in the seat as a county board as policymakers and staff is in the seat as administration, and have that discussion. All right, so I've been talking for a while. Questions, comments, thoughts, disagreements? It's fine. Yes, sir.
I know this is may not be 100% with the county board, but how do you deal with those First Amendment auditors that pop up in municipalities, counties?
I have an entire webinar series that I recorded on how to deal with First Amendment auditors. So shameless plug here, contact the Counties Association, you get a free copy of that.
I actually have it, so I.
You have it.
Okay.
All of us?
I sent
Send it to all department heads. But
Did
not
I do
county
department
board
heads?
members.
Not county.
I'll send it to you.
That'd be a good idea, see?
Yes.
Because I hope we never have one, but if we do, you hear all these on YouTube and the internet, you hear about all these horror stories of first auditor, amendment so-called auditors making the local governments, whether the city or county or whatever, look bad, so.
Yes, they do. We don't want to look bad. I always say, how many of you seen the movie Roadhouse? All right, a few. Be nice until it's time not to be nice.
Oh.
That's from that movie. By the way, they're remaking that movie. How do you remake that movie? You can't remake that movie. That's a classic. You can't remake that movie. But that's the theme of my First Amendment auditor presentation, is be nice until it's time to not be nice. So, yes.
Is this presentation emailed to us as well?
I can send it to you.
Okay, thanks.
It'd be good, yeah.
He sent the updated one today.
Okay, good.
Andy, I just have a comment. Earlier you talked about, supervisor maybe not being the right term. Well, I look at it this way. I have the privilege to serve my constituents in my district. Therefore, I'm supervising, as part of UGAR, this group and what we do in terms of setting policy. So I am supervising, but not people, us together. So that's why I look at the supervisor.
And I think that's the
role.
original intent of the word. Absolutely. When you go back in history, the term supervisor has a historical definition that is right in line with what you're talking about. You're supervising the legislative process as it relates to the electorate that put you in that seat. Absolutely. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Did I hear early on that you seemed to indicate that we needed to adopt the policy in regard to saying that we can do what we're doing? Did I hear something along that line early on?
Self-organized.
Or did I misunderstand what you said?
Self-organized ordinance. No,
Ordinance.
you heard that correctly. It's an easy process, one I would encourage you to take a look at. And Paul, if you want information, I'm happy to give you. It's very simple, one sentence. We're self-organized. You don't have to do a darn thing different. But having that ordinance on the books means next year, when your county board chair says, I demand a $25,000 per month salary, you can take that issue up.
That'll be good.
There'll be a lot of discussion.
Yes, sir.
Can you expand on the other opportunities that lie out there under self-organized? There are other opportunities.
Sure, and so when you look at the basics, it's setting compensation for your board, use of staggered terms for supervisors where you could actually have half the board elected in odd years, half the board elected in even years. And then in the event that there's a vacancy on the board, you get to establish the process for filling that vacancy. I forget exactly in 59.10 how a vacancy is filled now, but if it's by a certain date, then you have to have a special election, or the board chair with the board's consent, fills that seat. In other words, you can have a process that says, we are going to have candidates apply for that vacant seat, and we're going to have interviews with our administrative or executive committee, and then they're going to forward 3 names to the board chair who appoints the board. In other words, you can set that up however you want in terms of filling those vacant seats. Those are the primary attributes of self-organization.
May I follow it up with a question?
Yes.
How many counties have staggered terms?
None. But that's a big movement from the clerks. They're lobbying against that constantly. I'm teasing. No, nobody does it because here's the problem I've got with counties the way they're set up, and I shouldn't say it's a problem with counties. When I talk about being a visionary and setting the strategic plan for the county to look 2, 3, 4, 10 years down the road, say this is where we want to get. Every year we have an annual budget, and so everybody adopts the budget in November, and in December says, "Whew, I don't have to think about that for another 10 months." All right, so it's annual in terms of that vision. Then every 2 years, we elect a whole bunch of new board members. So how easy is it to be strategic and have a vision when you've got an annual budget process and board turnover every 2 years? It's really tough. All right, so a lot of roadblocks exist to being that visionary. That doesn't mean you can't overcome them, but there are a heck of a lot of hurdles in the way. It's very difficult. That's right. I know, okay, so I have my own law firm, all right, and there are 7 lawyers in that firm right now. We've talked about where we want to be a year from now, where we want to be 2 years from now, where we want to be 5 years from now. And we can implement certain things in order to carry out that vision. I couldn't do that if I was guessing as to who was going to be around next year. But is it helpful to have the discussion and adopt a strategic plan about where we want to be? That way, if somebody new comes on, we can say, hey, here's the strategic plan. This is where the board wants Trempealeau County to be 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I think that's helpful. When somebody comes to take out papers to run for the county board, what do you give them?
Don't be foolish.
We give them nomination papers, don't we?
Yeah.
Do we give them a board job description? Do we give them a copy of last year's budget?
No.
Do we give them a copy of the Trempealeau County Strategic Plan?
We have one, we haven't looked at it though in probably 7 years, nor updated it.
I give it to them after they're elected.
Because we don't want to discourage anybody from running. I get that. I understand that. Again, in my utopian fantasy world, when people take out papers to run for the county board, I'm giving them all of these documents, and I'm saying, here are the expectations. When you sit in that seat on the first night, you know exactly what's going to be expected of you. How many of you are brand-new county board members? Yeah, so when you sat in that seat for the first time and somebody said, Human Services requests a $350,000 transfer for a mental health commitment, how many of you knew exactly what was going on? I know Deb does. She's sitting over there smiling right now. But these are complicated decisions. This isn't easy stuff. And so I would much rather give everybody all of that information up front and say, here are the expectations. And if I give them a job description that talks about the role of a board member being that of part of a policy-making body, that makes it a lot easier discussion when we talk about roles and responsibilities than if they had no clue when they got on the board. So just some food for thought. I've seen other counties do it. If you want examples of job descriptions, I've got them, and I'd be happy to provide those to you guys if you think it'd be helpful. Other questions, other comments?
Very good. Thanks, Andy. That was great.
I'm not even done with ethics.
He's not done yet.
Sit
7
down.
o'clock is over.
No, he's got ethics.
You're hurting my feelings.
He's still got ethics left.
Oh, you're gonna do ethics yet?
Most important.
We're gonna do ethics yet?
I saved it till the end, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I didn't even
It's
see
not
that.
been an hour
This is
for
the
him
big
yet.
finale.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You didn't
I
get
was
a
going to
full
say,
hour.
we do an orientation
Yeah.
for new county board
Yes, we do.
supervisors.
Good.
It's about a 3-hour session. But
I
that's
won't talk
after they're
for another
elected.
2 hours. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, so if you have questions, ask me. But again, this is important foundationally because it establishes the boundaries for how it is that we conduct ourselves as elected officials and how it is that our staff is expected to act. I start with 2 really good quotes. I love these quotes. First is from Henry David Thoreau. There's no odor so bad as that which arises from goodness tainted. Second is from Warren Buffett. Takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. So what is the point of this? Because this isn't the law. If you violate one of these quotes, you're not going to get fined. You're not going to prison. But is an ethics violation all about the fine or potential jail time? No. It ruins your reputation. Does anybody want to see their name on the front page of the paper with the word ethics issue behind it? No. Kiss your political career, your personal reputation goodbye if that happens. And so it's more important to avoid these situations altogether than to try to figure out a fancy legal way to get around an ethics issue. I may be able to keep you out of jail. Mr. Niemeyer may be able to give you a get out of jail free card, which I'll show you about later. But that's not going to do anything for your reputation. All right? So again, let's start with the worst. The F word. Felony. Felony. That's the F word, Mr. Chair. Felony. 946.13. This is really bad stuff, all right?
I think you know me
This
too well.
applies to elected officials. It doesn't apply to employees. This is important. So this applies only to elected officials. Under 946.13(1)(a), if you're a public officer and you negotiate, bid for, or entered into a contract in your private capacity, you have a private pecuniary interest in the contract, and you're authorized or required by law to participate in the making of the contract as a public officer or employee, you violated the law. All right? And it's a felony if you violate the law. We also have 946.13(1)(b). If you're a public officer or employee, you participate in the making of the contract, or as in your capacity as an officer or employee performed a function requiring exercise of discretion in regard to a contract, and you have a private monetary interest in the contract, you violated the law. All right? So we have a prohibition in state law that prevents an employee or official of the county from doing business with the county. And it's an absolute prohibition. It's a strict liability crime. You don't have to prove intent here. We don't have to show, if I'm the prosecutor, that you intended to violate the statute or intended to do anything bad. I just have to show it happened, and then you're guilty. Now, there are exceptions to the statute, the most common of which is this first one. Any contract in which any single public officer or employee does not receive more than $15,000 a year from the state or the political subdivision is not guilty of 946.13 violation. So what does that mean? That means every contract that you have with the county has to be $14,999, right? No, we still have other issues. We still have other problems. You're just not going to commit a felony if you have a $14,000 contract. The consequences are huge. You go to jail and the contract's void. All right, so if your business has the contract with the county and that contract violates 946.13, you potentially go to jail, you've committed a felony, and the contract goes bye-bye. So everything that you've done for the county doesn't have to pay you. So it can get really ugly. In order to avoid liability, many people think that to avoid liability in any sort of conflict or ethics situation, all I have to do is leave the meeting, abstain from voting, don't participate in the debate or the discussion. But that's not entirely true. It may get you out of some problems, but what about the problem under 1A? Remember, in order to establish a 1A violation, all that has to be shown is that you have the authority to take some sort of action. Sitting on the county board may mean that you have the authority to take some action in relation to the contract. And so as long as the authority is there by virtue of your position, you can't avoid liability simply by leaving the room when the debate on the contract occurs, all right? So again, I would suggest to you, don't ever, ever in your private life do business with the county in your public life. That's the easiest way to avoid 946.13. As I mentioned, it's a strict liability statute, don't need to prove intent. Now, apart from felonies and criminal violations, we also have an ethics code for local government officials found in 19.59 of the statutes. If we look at coverage for this ethics code, It applies to elective officers of local government, your constitutional officers, your county board, all right? Administrator or administrative coordinators are covered by the statute. Employees are not covered by this statute. Remember before with 946.13, it covered officials and employees. The ethics code for local government officials does not cover employees. And so when we look at the categories of prohibited conduct under this ethics code, I think there are 5 categories, and we're going to go through each one of them briefly. In the first category, it's a ban on the use of your position to obtain financial gain or anything of substantial value for the benefit of you, your immediate family, or an organization with which you're associated. Now, the problem with this statute is that it uses terminology that is incapable of precise definition. What is anything of substantial value? What is that? If the company that handles all of the copiers for the county comes in and hands you one of those little squish toys with the copier company's name on it, says, here you go, give that to the kids or the grandkids. Is that something of substantial value?
No.
How many people think it is? No, that's not anything of substantial value. What if the same gentleman, instead of handing you a squish toy, hands you tickets to the Packer game next month?
Definitely take those.
What if
Write that down.
I was going to say, what if Aaron Rodgers is hurt for that game? Then the value might have come way down. But there we're talking about something of substantial value, all right? But there's a lot of gray area between Packer tickets and a little squish toy. So how do we try to define that gray area? I can tell you that the Government Accountability Board, the Ethics Commission, has defined it as anything having a value of $25 or more, all right? But that's not a hard and fast line. Does that mean that you can, if the price tag on that particular little trinket that you got is $24.99, that you're okay? No, not necessarily. Likewise, if something wades into $30, $40, is that automatically going to be something of substantial value that opens you up to violation of this code? No, not necessarily. It's very squishy and very difficult, which is why at the end of this presentation, I have what I call the smell test. And so when something starts to stink, start asking questions of your corporation counsel. Hey, I got this little trinket from the copy guy. Can I keep it? And if the corporation counsel says no, you don't get to keep it, all right? But letting your corporation counsel know of the problem is step one in making sure that you don't run into an ethics situation. All right. Second category of prohibited conduct. Ban on offering or giving, directly or indirectly, anything of value to a local public official if it could be reasonably expected to influence the local public official's vote, official actions or judgment, or reasonably be considered as a reward for any official action or inaction on the part of the local public official. The statute is worded so it's a ban on the public doing these things to you, but also the statute says that you can't accept this particular item or offering as a public official. Now again, this statute is loaded with vague terms. What does it mean to receive something directly or indirectly? What if the Packer tickets go to your spouse instead of you? This statute covers it, all right? We still got a problem here if the intent in giving you those tickets was to gain your favor when it comes to voting on the new copier contract for the county, all right? So again, you have to ask yourself the question, why am I receiving this? And if you go to your corporation counsel and say, hey, I just got these Packer tickets from the copier guy, what do you think? Your corporation counsel is going to say you need to immediately transfer those to me so that I may evaluate this problem. Third category. This has to deal with political contributions. This is sort of the campaign pay-to-play statute. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's making promises as it relates to your particular vote or refrain from action, and on behalf of political parties, and so on. Fourth category, it's a ban on taking any official action substantially affecting a matter in which you, a member of your immediate family, or an organization with which you're associated has a substantial financial interest. Again, you can see the vague terms. What is substantially affecting a matter? What does that mean? Is there such a thing as insubstantially affecting a matter? And where do you draw that line? And then when we talk about the financial interest, it's not just any financial interest, it's a substantial financial interest. And what does substantial mean? Is that back to the $25 or more threshold? Well, that's what the ethics board has said, that's what we look at, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to get you clearance in each and every circumstance. When we talk about the action, the official action, you live in a small county. And so inevitably, what you do as a county board is going to impact, at some point in time, you, a member of your family, or an organization with which you're associated. In fact, you could probably look at the county budget and identify at least one part of that budget that is going to impact one supervisor or a supervisor's immediate family or an organization with which a supervisor is involved. So does that mean you can never take action on a budget? You can never take action on a particular measure that is going to impact a broad class of people just because one member of that class that is being impacted happens to be related to you? No. There's an interpretive exception contained within the law. And that says if we are going to deal with an issue that impacts a broad class of people just because I or my immediate family member or an organization with which I'm involved happens to be a member of that class and is impacted, that doesn't mean I have an ethics issue. I can still take action on that particular measure. Now, as it relates to voting in salaries and things like that, as it relates to county personnel, there's an exception within the statute. And so if one of you has a spouse, for example, who is employed in the sheriff's office, and you're going to vote on the collective bargaining agreement granting particular employees, including your spouse within the department, a raise, that's okay. Number one, it impacts every member of the bargaining unit the same. And number two, there's an exception within the statute from taking action on benefits, wages, salaries, and so on. Fifth category of conduct, ban on the use of your office or position in a way that produces or assists in the production of a substantial benefit, direct or indirect, for you, a member of your immediate family, or an organization with which you're associated. Again, using your position in a way that produces or assists in producing a substantial benefit, direct or indirect. Incredibly broad and vague language contained within that statute. So what happens if you violate this? It's not a felony, but you're still subject to a forfeiture of not more than $1,000 for each violation. And if it's the political contribution in exchange for official action type violation, then you might go to prison. But all of these consequences, at least in my mind, are nothing compared to what it does to your reputation. So how do we avoid these issues altogether? Because that's what we want to do. We have a get out of jail free card. And that's the beauty of the ethics code for local government officials. Use that get out of jail free card liberally, a lot. Whenever you have a question about an ethics situation, go to your corporation counsel and ask the question. Corporation counsel is authorized by state law to give you an opinion. And if you follow that opinion and later it's found that you have violated the ethics code, you have the get out of jail free card of that opinion to rely upon. And frankly, while you don't want to see your name in that headline next to the word ethics violation, if the story reads that you did everything according to Hoyle and went to Corporation Counsel and Corporation Counsel blessed the particular action that you were going to take and you followed the advice of Corporation Counsel, reputationally that's a lot better than not using that get out of jail free card. And so hopefully I've not created a whole lot of work for your corporation counsel just now, but use that get out of jail free card liberally. And I think that he would tell you the same thing. When in doubt, come and talk to him. All right. So, questions to ask yourself, the smell test. And I developed all of these questions just based on the categories of prohibited conduct. These are the questions that you need to ask yourself that is going to raise that odor that tells you you've got a potential ethics situation you need to get away from it. Am I, my immediate family, and organization with which I'm involved, receiving anything of value for the private benefit of that, of you, your family, or the organization because of the position that I hold? Am I using the influence of my position to solicit something for the private benefit of myself, my family, or an organization with which I'm associated? Am I or my immediate family or organization, am I receiving from any non-relative anything of value for which I've not paid? Will an official action on my part possibly result in private benefit to me or my family or an organization? Will the use of my staff or the public facilities benefit me in my private capacity? Am I using public time, resources, or facilities for my personal gain? Now, not all of these questions, even if answered yes, result in an ethics violation. But, again, from a reputation standpoint, if you follow this smell test and you answer yes to any of these questions and you don't seek advice from corporation counsel, you may find yourself on the front page of the news being accused of some sort of ethics issue. I'll give you an example. It happened not far from here, just up the Mississippi River, in a town where non-metallic mining, I know that was a huge issue here in Trempealeau County a few years ago. It was an issue up and down the Mississippi River area where they had a ton of frac sand. Well, there was a town that wanted to open up frac sand mining within its jurisdiction. And you had a town board chair who was sitting on some very valuable property, who also had a brother who was sitting on some very valuable property. And so the town board had to make a decision as to whether they were going to open up mining. The town board chair may have recused himself, but then the town board chair's brother benefited from the decision that the town board was making. And the accusation was that the town board chair was influencing the town board for the benefit of his brother. That's what the front page story said. Ethics issue, town board chair looking out for his brother. Now, under the state ethics code for local government officials, is there a problem? No, because the brother is not considered a part of the town board chair's immediate family, because immediate family is defined as somebody who is receiving 50% or more of his or her support from the official, or the official is receiving 50% or more of his support from the third party. So brother wasn't receiving support from town board chair, so we don't have an ethics issue. There is no conceivable way that that fact situation creates a violation under the ethics code. But how do you think that town board chair's reputation fared throughout that entire process? He was never elected again. It was awful. It was ugly. So again, if he had followed the smell test and said, look, I got a problem here that I need to know how to deal with, he could have sought the advice of counsel and followed, or he could have just said, you know what, I am getting out of this entire debate altogether. I'm done. And I also realize that it's really difficult to deal with the ethics code at the town level, because oftentimes you're dealing with 3 town board supervisors. All you need is 2 to recuse, and you can't have a quorum. Mm-hmm. So that can be challenged. It's a little easier here at the county level. So again, ask yourself these questions, and if something starts smelling, talk to your corporation counsel right away. Questions or comments on the ethics code and application of the code? Now you're going to give me the hook?
Evidently, if there's no question. I want to thank you.
If you have a question later or something comes up later, can you email you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would ask, talk to your corporation counsel, and I'm happy to confer with him about that, because we do that as a counties association. We often get those calls from corporation counsel and others saying, here's a particular ethics issue, and for one reason or another, corporation counsel's in a tough position many times because he's serving so many different masters. Corporation counsel may say, I'm uncomfortable, Andy, would you mind helping out with this? I'm happy to do that anytime. The association will do that. And I'll just plug for the association as well. If you found any part of this discussion interesting and have follow-up, reach out to the association. We have a conference coming up in a month. It's going to be down in the Dells, where I'm going to be talking about roles and responsibilities at 2 different sessions, and then I'm going to have 2 sessions that are the top 10 things that I wish I would have known as a supervisor before I ever took office. It's going to be a fun discussion where I talk again about the observations that I've seen at counties throughout the state. So feel free to come on down to the conference and get more information, but reach out to the association. We got all sorts of resources that are available to all of you at any time.
And Paul has copies of this, all the presentation.
I'll send that out to you. I made it.
Either that or just put a
Oh, no, I didn't
put a
make
copy
it.
in their mailbox.
There are really good webinars on the WCA webpage.
There are. Yeah, we talk about Robert's Rules, open meetings. They do the cows
There's like
trainings.
5 all related to county stuff that are so excellent.
Good. Good to hear. Awesome.
Any other questions, Andy? Oh, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you
It was a
coming.
pleasure being here again.
You came all the way up from Milwaukee to do this. So that-
Almost.
Almost. Or
Well, you know, there's, Cedarburg, so it's
Oh,
north of
close.
Milwaukee.
That's pretty
North of
close.
Milwaukee. Just don't ask me to come back in January. We're good.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Okay, item B, we have Samuel's group here.
Drive carefully.
Mr. Berner.
Where do you want to put the closed session? Up after D?
Yeah.
Evening, everyone. How do you expect me to follow that up?
Yes, good.
And you get just as much time.
No.
No, it will not be. No, that was pretty interesting to hear all of that. and-
Just for a sake announcement, I think there might be somebody else who wants to get in on the closed session, but I was thinking of moving the closed session up because we have closed session people that are going to be sitting around here a long time if we don't move them up. So item 7, I'd like to move up to right before 6.
Are we in?
Is that possible?
Well, I'm sure it's possible. It's just the TV station prefers it to be at the end. But it's pretty smart.
I don't know, if you don't want to sit around another hour, or? I just
Mr.
think
Chair?
it's- Yes.
I think, if you care to inquire with the TV people, they do fill the blank space with something normally, so.
Okay. So I think that's what we should do, because I don't think you were planning on sitting through a session from how county boards are supposed to act, but I appreciate you sitting through, and it might have been interesting. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'll do my best to keep it brief. So, quick update, safety performance still is stellar. We have no lost time accidents on the job. We have had, what we typically do is our safety director will come through, safety directors from multiple contractors come through, put audits together, give direction and guidance to people where we see some potential violations and then get them corrected. So that's ongoing, and thank all the tradespeople in regards to them making that a priority. The other thing that I just want to get at the top of the meeting, I told the property committee this last week, the working relationship between the city and the county has been phenomenal from the beginning of this project and up until now, and continues to be that way. So I want to thank the city, and if we can communicate that to them. Hobson Street, they were planning to have that paved here this last week, and we had some precast that was coming in, so there was some communications between us and the city. They changed their dates with where they were going to pave, and it's just been great. It's been an exceptional process. I don't always see that when we deal with county and city relationships, but it's been great, and I thank the county and the city for making that effective and how we move forward with that. So the precast, you'll see that's going up. That's going to continue to go on. You can see the building is looking much different. I don't know if many of you have been on the website to see some of the aerial photos that are on there, but we're doing updated pictures on there. Aerial photos really give it a concept in regards to the imagery that's there. It's moving along well. Our goal is to have the roof start going on in September. There's quite a bit of roof that has to go on place, so we're doing it in sections, and we're working from obviously the west to the east with the connection point, with the goal of having the building watertight, snow tight before winter hits us. And then last month, we talked a lot about the discussion of funding for the renovation portion of the project. Just want to let everybody know, we're having a special property committee meeting next Monday where we're bringing in the department heads that are part of the renovation portion of the project. We're going to go over the original design concept with those department heads, start some discussion in regards to what can we change, what could we eliminate, kind of get to the bare bones needs, and then start to put some pricing together. It's not going to get done in one meeting. There'll be multiple meetings that we'll have, but that process is starting so that we can get that back to the property committee and then back to the board here. So that process is underway. I just wanted to let the group know that, and I expect that it'll be very, very informative for everyone, and that will make it a productive meeting. So other than that, things are moving along well. We did have some issues with some of the contractors short on manpower because obviously the renovation of schoolwork was taking a priority before they had to get in. So we had some people that were short, but we're starting to get some of that cleaned up again. It's just the nature of what happens in construction when we're getting the summer schoolwork done. So any questions for me?
It wasn't through anything out there that the power went out today in the courthouse?
I don't know. It's the first that I heard that. Maybe we were responsible. That's the first I heard of it.
Somebody cut the line out there.
So,
It was very short.
Yeah.
well, then it wasn't us. It would have been
Less
real
than
long.
5 minutes.
Supervisor Miller.
About 5 minutes? I was right in the middle of conversation with Stacy.
Last week, Richard Sasha, Supervisor Sasha, and I toured the facility out here, and I would certainly encourage any of you who have any interest at all to go to his office, and it's in one of the trailers on the side street there.
Yep.
You got two trailers, don't you?
Yeah, if you go to the first one there, that's where you'll just tell them you want a tour, tell them who you are. They're going to give you the PPE, hard hats and safety glasses, and give you the tour. So,
You would just, you're going to be amazed to walk through there. It's, if people ask you questions from your district, you can say you've gone through there, and they will explain what they're doing. If they have had any issues, I think, and you can ask them questions, and it's very worthwhile. So please, if you have the time.
yeah, I would encourage it as well. There's a lot going on there. It's more than just a bunch of concrete block going up. There's a lot of things that are integrated into that building. And
You
it's,
haven't poured the floor yet, have you? The floors?
portions of it are poured. Yep,
Okay,
portions
some
it are
of
poured.
that was still open when we went through it, and you know, I've had several people from my district ask, well, how come it's taking so long? You've got to see what's underground, and some of that, it hasn't been covered up yet.
Kurt,
Yeah, there's a lot of
remember
stuff.
the question we had, why the hospital was going so much faster than this one?
Yeah.
You know?
It isn't like
Yeah, it's a
building a
different
house.
animal. Yep. Yep. Any other questions? All right, thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Kurt. Item Z, a proclamation. You want to read the proclamation?
Sure. Whereas 2,148 rail grade crossing collisions resulted in 658 personal injuries and were responsible for 238 fatalities in the United States during 2021. And whereas 1,151 trespassing incidents have occurred in the United States, resulting in 528 pedestrians being killed and another 623 injured while trespassing on railroad property rights of way during 2021. And whereas educating and informing the public about rail safety, reminding the public that rail right-of-ways are private property, enhancing public awareness of the dangers associated with highway rail grade crossings, ensuring pedestrians and motorists are looking and listening while near railways, and obeying established traffic laws will reduce the number of fatalities and injuries. And whereas the International Association of Chiefs of Police, National Operation Lifesaver, United States Department of Transportation, and all local, state, county, and railroad law enforcement officers, first responders, and railroad corporations commit to partnering together in an effort to educate at a national level all aspects of railroad safety to enforce applicable laws in support of National Rail Safety Week. Therefore, I, John Austin, Trempealeau County Board Chair, do hereby attest my full support proclaiming September 19th to 25th, 2022 National Rail Safety Week, and I encourage all citizens to recognize the importance of rail safety education. And signed by John Austin.
Thank you. Patrick Park anniversary coming up, and I don't see Reed here, but Mike Corman's here.
Great. Good to see everyone tonight. Just want to take an opportunity to let you know about the 50th anniversary of Patrick Park coming up on September 24th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Again, September 24th, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's 50 years of a park that was dedicated to a 4-H agent serving in Clark County that passed away, and wanted to see that, didn't want to have the land sold, and wanted to benefit youth in the community. And so many people love that park. And we've received letters where people attribute their time, their children have spent at that park, to becoming adults that love the outdoors because of Patrick Park, because they couldn't afford to go on vacation. So we're celebrating the anniversary. We're going to celebrate Joe. We're going to celebrate the past of the park, where it is today, and where it's going in the future. And if you haven't been out there, the September 24th will be a good time to do that. We've done prairie restoration out there. There's all kinds of exciting things happen. We had a sandhill crane nest on the shores of Patrick Park on the Trempealeau River. We've had bobcat sightings out there. It's a really neat place. And we're gonna celebrate, have some fun. There'll be youth education activities, s'mores, face painting, a formal program, and food too. Food too. Lots of food, and it'll be a good time. And music. So bring your family, bring your friends.
Bring your dog.
Bring your dog. Walk your dog out on the trails. We're very excited. We're just got completed with Ashley for the Arts, and people were loving the trails on the boardwalk. So we heard a lot of positive comments here. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and hope to see you there. September 24th, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. See you there.
Please come. Extension and Pete's Head have worked really hard. Your staff have worked really hard to make this happen. So
It'll be fun.
yeah, if it rains, there's going to be a tent, so we
Right.
can all
Oh,
stand
and
under
the
it.
one other thing, if you haven't seen the 6 acres that just the Schenck family has graciously donated to the county for an addition to the park, you'll be able to get to see that in person as well. We'll have the corners marked, and you'll be able to see how that fits in with the park. So we'll see you there.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. I've had second thoughts, and I was just discussing it with Paul, and we think we can get through these amendments, so it's his fault where you just keep right on going, so
So
we get.
I just talked to TV, and they're gonna go into closed session.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then. Why didn't you tell me that?
We said we're going to have second thoughts on the park.
No, second thoughts on
What?
the, second thoughts on the closed session,
Let's do the
but they're gonna do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we can take like a 5-minute break or something like that.
Well, are you
10
gonna
minutes?
do that before you do the motion?
Oh, yeah, we gotta do the motion, to go into closed session. I need somebody to read it, or you want me to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
I would make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statutes 19.85, Parent 1, Parent D, to consider strategy for crime detection prevention related to upgrading the communication towers within the county.
Okay, call the roll.
No, second.
We need a second.
Oh, we got the
I,
second.
who did it? No.
Second, Mr. Supervisor Schultz.
Did you second it?
Yeah.
Full?
I did
Oh,
both.
you even did two.
Oh, you were the third?
That's
was the
a-
second now?
I
I
got,
think Larson was, he was right next
I
to
had, that doesn't
Dave
matter.
Larson.
I just saw his before I saw, because he was, anyway.
Okay,
You got it.
now I can do it. Oh, this
Now
is
it's
funny.
called.
Look who's first on the list. Jeannie Nutter.
Oh, yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Lori Severson. Andy Todd.
Yes.
Heather Fritsch.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Millett.
Yes.
David Orr.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes.
Riley Foltz.
Yes.
Robert Becker?
Yippers.
Dan Schreiner?
Yes.
Kellen Nelson?
Yes.
David Larson?
Yes.
16-0. Okay.
That's 16-0. We can take like a, what does it take, five minutes or so?
I'll-
10 minutes at the max?
Five,
You want to take a
probably.
10-minute break?
You want 10?
We're back in open session. Bigger board or? We're back in open session again, and there was no action taken in closed session, so we'll go on to item 6A. Extension Education and Communications Committee accepting the Chantis grant money?
Juntas.
Chantis. Wantos?
I think it's
It's
Sort of like,
Spanish. It's
sort of like
Hispanic.
San Jose. I call it San Jose, and it's actually San Jose.
Can I
Yeah.
start?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a couple of typos, but I'm just not going to do that. Whereas UW-Madison Division of Extension, Trempealeau County applied for a grant from the Wisconsin 4-H Foundation. And whereas the county was awarded this grant in the sum of $1,250. Whereas this money is intended to support county educators in their work with Latinx It's Latinx residents involved in the Juntos program. Now be it resolved that Trumbull County accepts this grant or reward, and be it further resolved that this money, $1,250, be deposited in revenue account 101.46766 and expense count 101.55624.348, and the clerk is directed to allow Trumpealeau County Extension access to these monies. Introduced by Extension Education and Communication Committee, Andy Todd, Lori Severson, Richard Seisha, Kevin Adams.
I move to approve this resolution.
Motion by Supervisor Nutter, seconded by Supervisor Foltz.
Yep.
Call the roll.
Any discussion? No, okay. David Larson.
Yes.
Jean Nutter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Lori Severson.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Heather Fritsch.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes.
Riley Foltz.
Yes.
Robert Becker.
Yes, sir.
Dan Schreiner.
Yes.
Kellen Nelson.
Yes.
16-0.
Item B1 comes from Law Enforcement Emergency Management Committee, transfer from general fund for courthouse security overtime.
Whereas the Trumpealeau County Sheriff's Office is responsible for providing security for Trumpealeau County Courthouse campus, whereas the Sheriff's Office has budgeted $2,500 for overtime expenses related to filling open shifts, training, and days when court hearings are running late. Whereas the overtime budget did not include coverage at the front door during evening activities within the courthouse, including county board and committee meetings. And whereas in 2022, the county board requested to have the front door security position manned during after-hours meetings. And whereas as of June 30th, 2022, the Sheriff's Office courthouse security overtime budget is over budget in the amount of $471. And whereas approximately $1,750 has been spent to date on overtime due to after-hour activity coverage. And whereas the Sheriff's Office is in need of $2,000 to cover overtime expenses due to front door security coverage. Now be it resolved that the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors hereby approves $2,000 to be transferred from the general fund to the Sheriff's Office courthouse security account number 101.51603.112. Introduced by Law Enforcement Committee, Dan Schreiner, Ron Johnson, Stacy Klein, David Orsh.
Move to adopt. Second.
What's my
I heard,
Supervisor Steiner, seconded by,
it was you, wasn't it? It was Ron Johnson was first.
oh, was it? I thought
Yeah.
it was Dan.
Who was it then?
I thought it was Dan Schreiner first, but okay.
Reiner was first.
Go for
I
it.
think Ron Johnson was second.
There you go.
Okay,
I just have a quick question.
yes.
This makes it sound like it's a new thing. Was this
It was, yeah, it was contracted.
It's been the sheriff's office for some time now. How long is that?
So when my 2022 budget was created last year, in 2021, that was not the case. There was no security at the front door for after-hours meetings. So that came up early this year and was implemented this year.
Okay, any other discussion?
Is that something we want to keep? I'm not, yeah, I mean, we cover this, but was there
Well-
something?
Well, it's
happened?
either-
Was there an issue?
Occasionally, you know, like a meeting, like board meeting tonight, all of us can get in here, but if public want to get in, they can't get in the building if you don't have coverage at the door.
How that was different.
Safety.
Courthouse things too that go after 5 p.m.
Oh, okay, sure.
There are a couple committees that meet after closing time. They might start before closing time, but go on after.
Services starts at 4 and goes later. Yeah, that's correct.
And Board of Health
Board of
is,
Health starts. I'm just surprised it's a new,
6.
a new thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't done before.
And it is included in my 2023 budget, so.
Okay, well, good. All right, thank you.
Okay, no other discussion? Call the roll.
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson,
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Lori Severson.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Heather Fritsch.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
Yes.
Dick Miller.
Yes.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes.
Riley Foltz.
Absolutely.
Robert Becker.
Yes.
I thought he was going to say ditto. 16-0.
Okay, 16, it passes. Item 2, 2022-03, or -8-03, PSAP grant funding for one public safety answering point center.
Whereas every municipal and state agency that provides fire suppression, law enforcement, and EMS may establish a 911 system and operate their public safety answering point, PSAP, to meet the needs of their citizens. And whereas the 2017-19 Wisconsin state budget required DMA to create an emergency services IP network to be provided to all PSAPs, this digital network is essential in transitioning the state's 911 system from the old and outdated analog system to a current and advanced next-generation 911 system. And whereas 2019 Wisconsin Act 26 created a much-needed PSAP grant program aimed to provide grant dollars for advanced training of telecommunicators, equipment or software expenses, and incentive to consolidate some or all of the functions of 2 or more PSAPs. And whereas 2019 Wisconsin Act 26 allows only 1 PSAP per county to receive the grant funds. And whereas DMA Chapter 2 requires the County Board of Supervisors to determine the 1 PSAP per county to be designated to receive grant funds via a resolution. Now, be it resolved that the Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors hereby designates the Trempealeau County Sheriff's Office Public Safety Answering Point as the 1 PSAP to receive grant funds for the purposes of 2019 Wisconsin Act 26 grant dollars and/or other federal grant opportunities. Introduced by Law Enforcement Committee, Dan Schreiner, Ron Johnson, Stacy Klein, David Orsh.
Motion to adopt.
They were in exact unison with you, Dick.
I saw Supervisor Orsh first, so we'll go with his. Seconded by Mr. Johnson. Second. And this, any discussion on it? This just requires a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it's carried.
Thank you.
Highway Committee.
What? Oh,
Amendment ordinance, Chapter 7 related to ATV, UTV routes. This is basically just cleaning up the language from our,
There's no, is that a flash drive or something?
I know, I asked for it and I never got it.
I don't know what we're voting on.
I know. I'll read it and.
oh, you don't have it?
There's no
No,
attachment.
I never got any attachment.
So I don't know what the changes
So,
are.
yeah.
Well, the old one,
No,
the
that's
old
the
one,
resolution, but
the old resolution, if
In
you
here it
recall, we
says
had just opened
be
up
attached.
one road at a time as they came to the highway committee and they wanted Turn Road S open or whatever, we'd open up one road at a time. And just,
I'll read it first.
okay, so you can read this. You read it.
Whereas on March 8, 2022, the Trumpealeau County Highway Committee voted pursuant to county ordinance authority to open all county roadways as ATV, UTV routes. And whereas based on this action, the county's ATV, UTV ordinance is in need of updating to reflect the changes as a result of the county roadways being opened up as ATV, UTV routes. And whereas the proposed revisions remove any reference to or a process of petitioning the committee for the designation of any county roadways as an ATV, UTV route. And whereas the attached proposed revisions in Chapter 7 of the Trempealeau County Code of Ordinances were approved by the Highway Committee on June 15, 2022. Now be it resolved that the Trempealeau County Board of Supervisors hereby approves the attached proposed revisions to Chapter 7 of the Trempealeau County Code of Ordinances regarding ATV, UTV routes, introduced by Highway Committee John Austin, Kellen Nelson, Dan Schreiner, Robert Becker, David Larson.
Okay. Motion by
But
Mr.
what are the changes? Can you tell?
Well, it is literally wrote out in there. The
Yeah.
changes are so minor.
It's kind of right in here already, but
Petitioning process.
Oh, so that was the big change?
yeah.
Okay,
The
all right.
motion was made by Supervisor Nelson and seconded by Supervisor Turner. Any other discussion?
Did you catch that?
Does that sound right to you, Rick?
Yes.
I shouldn't.
They were just clearing up the language.
And Al had emailed me, he was gonna try and get on, I don't know who the TC laptop is, but.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
That's that.
correct me if
Oh, is it?
I'm wrong. The Board of Supervisors granted the Highway Committee, empowered them to make the decision regarding individual openings, individual highway openings, right?
Right.
Okay, that matter came before the board prior to this board coming on, and if I remember correctly, the board in maybe it was just an advisory vote, voted against opening all the roads in the county. And now you're coming back and asking that it be formalized. Is that correct?
Well, I think we did bring this whole thing to county board before, but it still had the old language on it. It had the language from the old.
Too many people on things.
But all I'm saying is, my understanding is that they empowered the committee to make the decision to open one at a time, and the committee decided to open up all of the county roads, and then it was brought to this body prior to April, and this body voted against opening it, and the highway committee went ahead and opened the roads. Is that correct?
That is correct, but in retrospect, the highway department has the authority based on Chapter 7 to regulate ATV, UTV usage on all county roads.
But this committee gave them, this
No,
board...
the state statute gives it to them. So even though the county board voted, I think it was a big majority voted no, because there were several public hearings on it, and many townships did not want to open all of the roads. But it turns out the highway department does have authority based on Wisconsin Statute 7. Is it in the DNR or state
Yeah.
statute? So they have the authority to open up the roads, so
They can
the,
overrule us, is what you're saying.
yeah, they can override our decision because they have statute.
They have jurisdiction over county roads.
Okay,
Clarify
but this group approved the appointment of those 5 people, and that same group said no.
No, this group said no.
That's what I'm saying. This group approved appointment to that committee, approved those people there, But when it came in for discussion, the majority said no. So,
Well-
I don't recall exactly what the figures were. I don't think it did not pass. We had some opposition to it, but it wasn't.
well, it doesn't make
Yeah.
a difference. Corp counsel, he looks like he has all the answers there.
Well, I don't know if I have all the answers, but I'll.
Well, yeah, and I'll add, I mean, I was in the group that had the discussion. It was not, there was three townships that were opposed to moving it forward. And speaking from the Highway Committee, I served there prior to being reelected. We brought it it was brought to the county board more as a courtesy and for more viewpoints. Prior to it coming to the county board, we had the ability to approve it before that. And for the record, I voted against it both times, but the committee has the jurisdiction to do so.
And it's unfortunate that information, I mean, many of us knew that state statute would overrule whatever decision we would make. We have to abide by what the state statute says. And it's really clear in Chapter 7 that the highway departments have exclusive jurisdiction over determining usage of ATV, UTVs on county roads. However, a lot of ATV and UTVs are on Highway 10 and 93, so I think there's some confusion about what roads are open.
Mr. Niemeyer, would you please clear this matter up?
Well, I will do my best. I can tell from my recollection, I can tell you what from my recollection, I didn't review this before tonight. My recollection was that the Highway Committee did vote to open all county roads, because originally it's just by petition. And then it was decided as a, not consideration, to send it to the county board just as a kind of advisory. But that was to whether or not to open all of the county roads or not. It wasn't about the changes in the ordinance. My recollection is the county board did not approve opening all of the county roads to ATV, UTV routes. But it went back to the Highway Committee, and by our ordinance, they have the authority to open them all if they want to, and it does not require the county board approval. I'm looking at our ordinance right now. It says county trunk highways may be designated as ATV, UTV routes only with the approval of the Highway Committee. And so that was the authority granted to them by this board through Chapter 23 of the Wisconsin statutes. And so they did have the authority to open all county roads to ATV, UTV routes without board approval.
But this board gave them authority.
And until they take it away, they will continue to have that authority.
But they took it away when they voted, in a sense.
No, they did not. What they said, because it was an advisory, because they don't have to get the approval of the board in order to open the routes. They were doing it as a courtesy. That's the word I was looking for. Why they did it back then. So now they've already opened all the routes. Now they're changing the ordinance to reflect what it is that the Highway Committee did by opening all the routes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
It's very confusing.
Just to be known, I attended many Highway Committee meetings before being elected to here with objections to this. When it came up, I voted no on opening them. But now that it's water under the bridge, this is cleaning up language and needs to be done.
That's basically all this is, just cleaning up the ordinance itself, so. I think this can be done by voice vote. We'll at least try it that way. Does it have to go to?
Maybe do it just because there's some
Okay.
controversy about it too. so.
Okay.
Isn't it?
But it's
Yeah, it is. It's an ordinance. So
I think
let's go
it's
to voice vote.
controversial to do it. Roll call.
Roll call vote. Roll call vote.
The board should have
Yes.
taken it away. that night.
Robert Becker,
Yes,
Dan Schreiner,
Yes.
Kellen Nelson,
Yes.
David Larson.
Yes.
Jeannie Metter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson. Bridget Turner.
Yes.
Stacy Klein.
Yes.
Lori Severson.
Yes.
Andy Todd.
Yes.
Heather Fritsch.
Yes.
Kevin Adams.
yes.
Dick Miller.
No.
David Orch.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes.
Riley Foltz.
Yes.
15-1.
Okay. Item D, this comes from Personnel Bargaining Committee, merging of Trumpealeau County Employee Handbook and Employment Policies.
Whereas the Trumpealeau County Board adopted the current employee handbook effective 4/20/2010 and revised the handbook on 1/1/2013. whereas multiple policies within the handbook have been updated and approved as addendums to the handbook since 1/1 of 2013. And whereas multiple standalone employment-related policies were not included within the handbook and employees would need to attempt to locate them elsewhere for reference, other times the handbook would offer a condensed version of the policy and would refer to the full policy for additional, oh, nuts, I'm sorry. I went like that, didn't I?
No,
Would refer to the full policy for additional details, and employees would need to attempt to locate the other version for more details. And whereas having the policies in multiple locations and versions is confusing to employees and creates liability issues for the county. And whereas the document as a whole has been updated to include a new cover page, table of contents, updating yours to employee there, and updating his, her to he, she to employee there. And whereas the revised employee handbook pertains to all employees of the county, however, those who are covered by a collective bargaining agreement have other personnel policies and practices contained in a collective bargaining agreement that may supersede this employee handbook. Now be it resolved that the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors hereby adopts the merged and updated employee handbook as one document effective August 15, 2022. Introduced by Personnel Bargaining Committee, Kellen Nelson, Jeannie Nutter, Ron Johnson, John Austin, and Heather, you were remote on that.
She was remote.
So I marked you down.
I marked it X. Didn't I mark it
No,
X?
I just put one there because I was pretty sure she was there. And Heather Fritsch, yep.
I'll second.
motion by
Ron?
Supervisor Ron Johnson and second by Supervisor Nutter. Any discussion?
Does this have to be roll call?
Pretty simple. It was a mess and now it's
Okay.
not.
Yeah, now it's all together in one book.
I've been advised that this can be just a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried.
Change that one more time.
Item E, designate county board supervisors as members.
Use that language there.
Oh. Designate county board supervisors as non-employees for non-payroll purposes.
Whereas the law is not definitive as to whether county board supervisors are employees of the county, and whereas under various federal and state laws and other legal analyses, elected public officials are not considered employees of the municipality that they govern. And whereas the IRS has determined that elected public officials are employees for purposes of income tax withholding. And whereas Trumbull County wants to clarify its position as it relates to county board supervisor status as employees/non-employees within the county. Now, be it resolved that the Trumbull County Board of Supervisors hereby adopts the policy that county board supervisors are not considered employees of the county unless otherwise provided by law. Be it further resolved that the county board supervisors will continue to receive W-2s for their compensation based on the IRS determination. Introduced by Executive Finance Committee, Riley Foltz, David Larson, John Austin, David Orsh.
Motion by Supervisor Larson, second by, was that you?
It was some lady over in here.
Oh. Mr. Supervisor Todd, any discussion?
I
Mr.
just
Nutter.
have a question. Was there something that kick-started this to make it become an issue, or? I mean, it's, in 10 years, it's never been brought up before, so it's just.
I think it's probably the COVID issue that started it more than anything, masking issues. We have a board member that can't really meet in the board out there as a board member if she's considered an employee, being non-vaccinated. But if she wears a mask, she can go as, just like anybody in the public can go out there with a mask, so it just clears up a board situation, committee situation. Any other discussion on it? Not, we could just call for the vote. Do you have to voice vote this?
It can just be voice, yeah.
Yeah. Call the voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, it's carried.
Have taxes stopped being taken out?
We have-
Should we make it
We-
a resolution that we're tax exempt?
Yeah.
Then you'd have to give me a S-211 every time. No.
And please don't
you-
ever give us a 1099 because that's a nightmare.
And that's why we got in trouble with the IRS. So that's why you always have been given a
Okay.
W-2.
Because 1099s are terrible.
Look at them all the time. You just put it in with your taxes.
You can't.
You have to take out your own taxes from 1099s.
Oh, yeah.
It's a mess when you do your taxes.
Well, I don't do my own taxes. I just let somebody else do
I'll do your taxes.
it. I hire them, $400 a year.
You
Anyway,
can't take one more thing. What's next?
What's claims?
uh,
I guess I'm gonna use it for this
Members'
one.
claims.
Oh.
Go ahead, read members' claims.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk more. Whereas the Audit Committee has audited the following claims and recommend that they be allowed as follows. John Austin, $1,520.63. Kevin Adams, $317.51. Robert Becker, $374.38. Riley Foltz, $157.50. Heather Fritsch, $302.50. Ron Johnson, $221.25. Stacy Klein, $270. David Larson, $241.25. Dick Miller, 0. Kellen Nelson, $64.38. Jeannie Nutter, $423.75. David Orsh, $108.76. Richard Seisha, $208.75. Dan Schreiner, $303.13. Lori Severson, 0. Andy Todd, 0. Bridget Turner, $314.88. Total per diems, $3,500. Total expenses, $1,328.67. Grand total, $4,828.67. Now be it resolved that the claims be allowed as shown. Introduced by Audit Committee, John Austin, Dick Miller, David Orsh.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Supervisor Nutter, second by Supervisor Turner. Any discussion? I was surprised to see mine, but it included some of last month's. Forgot mileage for. Anyway.
Guessing how much of that, though?
Voice vote, roll call vote. Go ahead.
Andy Todd? Yeah. Heather Fritsch?
Yes.
Kevin Adams?
Yes.
Dick Miller?
Yes.
David Orsh?
Yes.
John Austin?
Yes.
Riley Foltz?
Yep.
Robert Becker?
Yes, sir.
Dan Schreiner?
Yes.
Kellen Nelson?
Yes.
David Larson?
Yes.
Jeannie Nutter?
Yes.
Ron Johnson?
Yes.
Bridget Turner?
Yes.
Stacy Klein?
Yes.
Lori Severson?
Yes.
16-0.
Passes. Okay. Item 9 was announcements, elections, appointments. We have one board member who did her diligence and went to the diversity.
Yeah,
And would you like to come up front, or you can do it from right there. You got a speaker.
All right.
Yeah.
So this morning I attended the WCA Regional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion meeting. I went mainly just because I was curious to find out how the WCA was including DEI, what measures they were taking, and then how that would potentially impact our county. And I know, it's a very politicized topic and can be very divisive and polarizing, depending on people's beliefs and stances and how they feel about things. But it was a really great meeting. For the Western region, there's 9 counties, and there were 12 of us there. So I got to know some people from other counties. The neat thing was they had the chairwoman from the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors give a presentation, and then the Brown County executive give a presentation as well. They were very different presentations because they spoke a lot to how each county has different issues when it comes to DEI. So it really, it got me thinking about a lot of different things that I had never thought about in this context. Looking at different tools and resources that we can use to help each other. So it's not just a race issue, it could be families or people in poverty, the disabled, the veterans, the incarcerated, and how that affects their families. Brown County particularly has a mentorship program for kids that are susceptible to possibly going into that system, depending on the situation they're already in. So it got us thinking about a lot of different things, like, are we reaching and serving all of the populations in our community? Are we accessible? Are we approachable? We talked about in our community that, we've got the Spanish population, also, some economically depressed people, especially with, we were talking about the geography, how not everybody has internet or easy accessibility to the technology, and looking at different solutions. So I was really proud of our county because there were some issues that came up with neighboring counties like Buffalo County, and like I said, neighboring counties that I already see us using solutions. An example is like our health director, we talked about that Spanish-speaking population, how do we reach them? And he's utilized, finding a good member in that community that can connect with them so that they don't have that, they're not intimidated about coming to the county, or they don't have that language barrier. Human Services has done some really great things as far as, CPS and not taking the kids out of the house if it's not necessary. That was a concern there too. So just looking at the different ways we could start looking at each county and the different approaches we could take, because I think each county has their own situation. So this was just the beginning of a conversation. They're having regional meetings throughout the month, and then they're going to have more meetings, of course, at the conference next month.
So did you get designated to be the person to carry on the discussion within our county? There was nothing formal, but yeah, right. That was a big piece of their, I really wanted to go, but I couldn't, but that there would be somebody designated so that you just don't go and hear this and then be done with it.
Right, yeah, it's an ongoing.
That we carry on this conversation within the board and.
That she has graciously volunteered.
Voluntold, yeah.
Did they, it would have been good to have that on WebEx if WCA did it. Normally, all their meetings are taped, so you can see it later. Did they do that?
No, and I think mainly because it was, so many different regional meetings. And then the last half hour was, we just broke down into small groups. So it was really nice. Like, there was a board member, a Native American from Jackson County, and I had no idea the problems that the Native American communities have faced there, and even her being a board member, or we even talked about the board itself. Like, we have a very, like I said, I'm proud of our county. We have a very diverse group on here, whereas a lot of other counties aren't that same way. So finding that the proper representation for the population. Cool. But yeah, there's going to be ongoing meetings, of course, next month. So I'd be curious to go and see what other people are talking about and the other solutions.
I do know Jackson County, being originally from Jackson County, that's my home area, that they deal with a lot of Native American problems. That's where I was born and raised, pretty much, so yeah.
Yeah.
I can concur.
There.
Yeah, and then of course, like Milwaukee County is completely different, and the chair, this young woman, she was really sharp and caring and very understanding of how we need to identify what's going on in our community or our county, and then just use the same type of tools and resources to help with that.
Cool. Yeah, and thanks for doing that.
Oh yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Stacy. Paul, you had an announcement?
Yes, I don't know how many are still on county board that were when Geraldine Van Tassel was on, but she passed away on Saturday, and her funeral is coming up this Friday up in Osseo. So I just wanted to announce that.
Okay. Exec Finance Committee Budget General Fund update.
They were mailed out to them
In your
in the
deal here.
packet.
Correspondence, did
And
you
the
have
other
any?
was on your desks tonight.
Did you have any correspondence?
I have no correspondence.
You should make
Nothing?
a little announcement about Reynolds and the congressional medal.
Oh,
that he
yes.
got. That was pretty amazing. Right there in Pigeon Falls.
I think.
That actually was on Channel 8 last night,
Oh,
even
it
though it
was?
happened a week ago.
No, I don't know why
There
they
you
didn't
go.
televise it live.
It was very cool.
But they did pick it up through the high school
and got their.
Yeah.
So they have it both on our channel and use channel 8, I think, right? Both. I know our YouTube channel has it.
Had-
They would have done it live.
It was,
It was very
almost 2 hours, but
touching.
it was
It was fantastic.
stuff I didn't even know about. the merchant-
Internationally acclaimed.
It was,
And the person from the embassy in Norway really, like, that made me cry listening to him talk.
Because they gave two
He got a
awards.
medal from Norway and the congressional medal.
And
Two
one more
medals.
from, he got 2 from Norway.
Oh, 2 from Norway,
Two
okay.
from Norway.
God, I was there, how'd I miss that?
anyway.
And
One
thank
went
you for the
around his-
cake.
One went around his neck and one was in a little box thing.
But what a amazing human being. It was just something. He's 105.
I was pretty proud of my classmates too, Buddy and Colonel Onrood, that's one of my classmates. and
Oh, okay.
Buddy Tomper was too, so.
Well, it was totally amazing.
Anyway. Item 12, instruct the clerk to pay mileage per diem. Motion. That was Supervisor Johnson and Supervisor Foltz for sure that time, I
I
think.
think I got it. Okay.
Okay,
Are you ready?
ready.
Lori Severson. Yes? Okay. Andy Todd. Heather Fritsch. Kevin Adams. Dick Miller.
Yes.
David Orsh.
Yes.
John Austin.
Yes.
Riley Foltz.
Yep.
Robert Becker.
Yes, sir.
Dan Schreiner.
Yes.
Kellen Nelson. David Larson. Jeannie Nutter.
Yes.
Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Bridget Turner. Yes. Stacy Klein. 16-0. Everybody gets paid.
We can adjourn at 9:38.
Till the next meeting is
Next meeting is September 22nd at 7 PM.
26th.
Or 26th. Are we talking about meeting early there again, too? Somebody talked about,
We can't because the county board, WCA conference is the week before.
oh, okay.
So. And then we got to.